Hey guys, I'm Dov, and today I'm back with some more stat analysis. My last stat analysis video I did of the 30th anniversary Regiments of Renown, just showing them off and describing to you guys what was different about them, what key things to look for. It was very well received, so I figured I would do the same with the Queen and the Crone DLC. We're also going to be throwing in Elithanar and his goodies, the free LC stuff as well. Just so that you guys can get a feel for what's in this DLC if you haven't bought it yet, or you are still considering it. You can have a look at what exactly comes with it. In terms of multiplayer, of course, this is specifically geared to multiplayer. Some of this is applicable to campaign, but I'm not really going to be going into their unique campaign mechanics or anything like that in this video. It's purely going to be about their multiplayer stats. So let's get started. First things first, Averlorn has been added with Alarielle the Radiant. So Alarielle is a legendary lord, and before we get to her, I just wanted to quickly touch on one thing with Averlorn, the faction, that differs from the regular High Elves. Obviously, you have a more limited legendary lord selection. You don't have access to Teclis Tyrion or Elithanar, but you do have access to Forest Spirit units in the form of Treemen, Treekin, and Dryads. Now, you do pay a bit of a premium. Just for comparison, we can look at the Wood Elves here. You can see 550, let's see here, 900 and 1500, whereas these are 575, 950, and 1575. So you can see they are slightly more expensive to bring for the High Elves, but it does give you, most importantly, an option of another relatively cheap infantry. Dryads are pretty good at cutting through other chaff tier infantry, and the High Elves' next cheapest unit is the Spearmen, so you can see they're not too far off from them. It gives you an option to go a little bit wider, which is always nice with the High Elves. The Treemen and Treekin aren't quite as good of picks. I mean, they can be useful in certain situations, especially with Alarielle providing a nice healing Death Star. You can sort of do a similar thing to the Wood Elves, albeit not as effectively, because, again, they're slightly more expensive, and you also don't have access to the Firebark Elders to give you that area of effect flame resistance to make the tree builds that much more viable. But again, variety is the spice of life, and having more options is always a good thing. So one thing to note about the Averlorn faction in multiplayer, you do get access to these units, and you do in campaign as well. Now let's move to Alarielle herself, the legendary lady of this DLC, well, one of them at least. She is very much a healer focus. However, she does have a good mix of spells with light, life, and high magic. So let's go ahead and take a look at what she can take. She's got some mount options, of course no mount. You can take her on a steed, a barded steed, or most likely you're going to be bringing her on the Great Eagle, as it puts her up in the air, away from all the nasty sworded melee on the ground. So yeah, in terms of her spell selection, she's got Faw's Protection, which is a very nice buff from the lore of Light. Also, it gives you armor and 27 melee defense. Banishment, of course, you guys have seen plenty of on my channel. It's a nice vortex spell, very powerful, and makes Alarielle, gives her a nice damage dealing option for big blobs of infantry. Earthblood is what it is, an area of effect healing. Shield of Thorns isn't wildly useful, but the missile resistance can be good in certain situations. I'm not honestly a big fan of having this as a spell, but it's a useful ability, say, on Sisters of Thorn. But yeah, typically we'll cut that one. Faw's Protection is one. I might bring this if I have a little bit of extra gold, but typically I'll cut that as well. If you're expecting to be fighting other flying units, Tempest is a must pick, as it will keep Alarielle herself safe in the air if you think you're going to be facing flying units. If not, it's perfectly fine to cut that spell. Arcane Unforging is a nice single target plus ability recharge direct damage spell. It can definitely be good in certain situations. Honestly, I'll flip between Banishment and Arcane Unforging. If it's a faction with healing, or if their lord is going to be healing, I probably won't take Arcane Unforging. I'll take Banishment instead. If it's the other way around, then I'll take on Arcane Unforging. So yeah, that's Alarielle. Of course, her items, failed to mention, 12% physical resistance in an area of effect of 40 meters. Shieldstone of Isha, very strong. Also stacks with the Guardian trait, which I don't know if any of the, yeah, the Pure Main Company have that. We'll get to them in just a minute here, but the other ones here, she has Stave of Averlorn, which gives you negative miscast chance and greatly improves your power recharge rate. I don't always take this, but sometimes, you know, if you have the extra funds, it can be useful. It can definitely help you dump out a lot of healing very quickly if you need to. Star of Averlorn is pretty much going to be an auto pick. It's a really powerful very small area of effect healing ability. Yeah, like I said, very small area of effect, but it is incredibly powerful. It lasts quite a while and heals for a lot of HP, so very strong. Next up with this DLC comes the Handmaiden. She is a hero for the High Elves. She can take an Elven steed or a Barded Ithilmar steed. She's a hybrid melee ranged hero, so you can see, if we take a look at her actual stats here, 40 armor, so not that much armor, but pretty good leadership. Of course, speed varies depending on the mount, and if you put her on the Barded steed, she also gets 70 armor. But she's also got decent attack and defense. Of course, being a High Elf, she's also got martial prowess. No armor piercing, well, 110 armor piercing, but not a pure armor piercing like the Noble. However, she does have a 35 bonus versus large, which is always nice. She also does flaming magic damage at 180 range with armor piercing missiles, so very, very strong at range in certain situations, especially shooting at things like trolls, you know, big regenerating monsters in particular. She's going to be very good against. I haven't found the Handmaidens to be wildly useful, but let's take a look at her abilities as well. Foe Seeker, of course, and she's also got this Quicksilver Shot, which gives reload skill to all units within an area of effect. She also has 2 more items that give missile damage and additional reload skill and melee attack in an area of effect. This Horn of Isha in particular is a very nice one. Reload skill and melee attack are both pretty pertinent for the High Elves, so typically I'll take her with just that, maybe up on a steed here. 1100 points, relatively expensive, not honestly too bad, but she can definitely be useful in the right situation. Moving on to the Regiments of Renown here, we've got Spearmen, Scions of Mathlan, the Regiment of Renown Spearmen. Of course, better combat stats, leadership, as you know. They also have expert charge defense rather than just charge defense against large. If you look at this icon right here, you'll notice it changes to have that white chevron on it, just a plain shield. The plain shield is the expert charge defense, so even infantry-sized models don't apply their charge bonus when charging into the front of the Scions of Mathlan if they're braced. They also have this Aura of Protection, so if your mana is above 50%, you'll get a 12% damage resistance area of effect, similar to the new effect that the Luminarch of Hysh got. I think it's actually exactly the same effect, but yeah. Of course, they are just High Elf Spearmen, relatively expensive, but they do have incredible melee defense at 51, and a good leadership, and that expert charge defense, of course, as well, and the Aura of Protection. So next up, we've got White Lions. Now, White Lions, you guys may have heard me and many others say, are not that cost effective. However, these Pure Main Company are almost an auto-include in any matchup where you think you're going to be facing armor. They have the Guardian trait, so if you have Alariel nearby, she's going to be stacking that to give plus 30% total physical resistance to Lords and Heroes. Everyone else gets the 12% from Alariel herself, but Lords and Heroes in particular will get quite a bit more, so it's very, very powerful ability to have, certainly. They also have Armor Sundering, which is nice if you're facing an armored opponent, although they do armor piercing in melee, of course. All units have some non-armor piercing damage. And one thing you can do as well is throw these guys up against a big armored monster or something like that, and then your archers will perform much more cost effectively against them because, of course, their non-armor piercing missiles will do more damage once the armor is sundered. And one other thing I forgot to mention, this is, I believe, free LC, this is for everyone, but the High Elves also got access to a couple more Lores of Magic just with their generic mages here. They've got Shadows and Heavens, so they have 2 more options to sunder armor with the Withering from Lore of Shadows, as well as Curse of the Midnight Wind from Lore of Heavens. So you do have some nice armor debuffing options, which means these non-armor piercing missiles can be a lot more cost effective, especially if you combine the Pure Main Company with one of these spells. Then in particular you can get a lot of value out of these non-armor piercing troops. So that's why I think the Pure Main Company are almost an auto-include in a multitude of matchups. You can almost build a build around them in a certain way. Obviously it's only one unit, but still very powerful. Next up, we've got the Regiment of Renown Phoenix Guard. These guys are quite expensive at 1650. Many of the Regiments of Renown for the High Elves, I mean, the cheapest one is 850, so these are all relatively expensive. But yeah, obviously better combat stats, leadership goes without saying. They also have magic damage, which in Game 2, as you guys may have heard me say before, is very important. There's a lot of physical resistance floating around, particularly with a lot of factions having access to Guardian-type units. You're definitely going to want magic damage if at all possible, unless you're fighting the dwarfs, of course, but you wouldn't bring a halberd then anyway. But yeah, they've also got this ability here. It doesn't have anything in the tooltip about it, but essentially when the unit model dies, it kind of blows up and deals some damage. It's this Mark of Assyrian trait here. So yeah, when they're struck down, the unworthy killer is soon engulfed in Assyrian's vengeful flames. So essentially they just blow up when they die, and it deals damage to enemies around them. So a very powerful unit. Of course, the fact that Phoenix Guard are already super powerful, and these guys are even better with their martial mastery, just juicing up their stats. They're going to have, you know, 65 melee defense and what is that, 53 attack. So that's just ridiculous. These guys have amazing stats. Granted, they are very expensive. Next up, for the archers, we've got Regiment of Renown Lothern Sea Guard. No shields, unfortunately, on these guys. I wish they would have made them the shielded variant, but oh well. They have a lot going on there. You can see from their traits down at the bottom, they pick up quite a few additional traits. So let's go through what they gain. Of course, better combat stats goes without saying, and of course, since they're a ranged unit, they also have a better reload rate, and they're more accurate. They cause fear, as opposed to the regular Lothern Sea Guard, which don't. They also have Vanguard deployment, and they can fire while moving. They can't fire in 360, but they can fire while moving, which is sort of a nice addition. It's not amazing for them, but if you're, let's say, advancing on an enemy, or if you kind of move at like an oblong angle, like kind of tangentially to your enemy, you can sometimes fire while you're moving that way, even though you're not necessarily moving straight towards them. It's a little bit of a strange trait on the non-360 degree shooting units, but having the Vanguard deployment means if you go with a very heavy Vanguard with an R and a lot of Shadow Warriors and stuff, then you'll get an additional spear option to take with you out front there. Next up, we've got the Shadow Warriors. Now, the Shadow Warriors are a new unit that comes with the DLC, so we'll take a look at the base unit itself and compare it to a similar unit, and then we'll look at the Regiment of Renown after. So, Shadow Warriors are a stock Vanguard missile unit that has 360 degree shooting, fire while moving. They don't do armor piercing damage, although they do 4 AP per shot, which is not too bad. Pretty in line with other high elf bow units, but they have very long range, they can fire while moving, and they have stock. And yeah, just a lot going on. Of course, martial prowess, and they also have pretty solid combat stats overall, even without the martial prowess. So very good unit in certain matchups. They're not going to be good in every matchup, but let's compare them to a similar unit on the Wood Elves roster, the Deepwood Scouts. So obviously, Shadow Warriors are 150 points more expensive. They do have 15 more armor and significantly more health, which I find quite interesting. They've also got much better combat stats. Melee defense is the same, but the Shadow Warriors have 36 melee attack, meaning they can actually put some damage out in melee. Not that you would want them in melee, if at all possible. But they do have better charge bonus, slightly less ammunition, and of course they pick up the martial prowess. So they are 150 points more expensive, but at least on paper, they definitely have the stats to back up that price increase, as opposed to the Deepwood Scouts. So yeah, that's Shadow Warriors in a nutshell. Now they do have a Regiment of Renown, the Grey here, who pick up quite a bit more melee defense, of course, attack, missile damage from their better reload rate, better accuracy, and in terms of traits, they pick up a few things. They have Snipe, which means they remain hidden while firing. The regular Shadow Warriors do not, but these guys do. They also have the Loic Shroud ability, which gives them stock and basically unspottable at very close range. 24% extra speed, so if you need to get out of dodge and maybe hide from enemy skirmish fire, very useful ability to have. I haven't found these guys to be wildly cost effective. The units in this class, that sort of elite-ish skirmisher that fires in 360 but doesn't necessarily have armor piercing, is kind of a weird niche. They're good in certain matchups, certainly, like Skaven, Beastmen, any other matchup where you think you're going to be facing a lot of low armor stuff, they can be good there. But in other matchups, they don't really have much of a place, like against a lot of the higher armor factions. So a little bit of an interesting unit and Regiment of Renown. I'll have to do some experimenting to see if I can figure out the niche for these guys. But they are definitely good units in certain situations. Like I said, definitely against the Skaven. Beastmen probably would be pretty good. Potentially the Lizardmen as well, although I would need to try that out. If you go for a heavy armor sundering build, of course, like using the Pure Main Company and one of the spells I mentioned earlier, these guys could be potentially a lot more cost effective, but at that point you might as well just bring regular archers. I don't know. Like I said, it's an interesting unit. I'll have to do some more playing around with it and see how it goes. The other new unit in this DLC is the Sisters of Averlorn. So these are a proper armor-piercing missile unit for the High Elves, which is awesome to have. They are relatively expensive at 1100 points. They only have 40 armor, but they do have pretty solid combat stats. 36 attack and 38 defense is really nice for a skirmisher, and keep in mind that is without the martial prowess buff active. They do fire and magic damage with their ammunition, so not going to be amazing against the dwarves. The armor piercing is still nice, but it will get mitigated by their magic resistance a bit. But against things like Skaven, again, and anything where they're going to be bringing regenerating large monstrous units, or just anything with armor in general, these guys can melt through really fast. Armor and physical resistance, like Grail Knights, things like that. Just a very good unit overall, although you do have to be careful you don't overinvest because they are quite expensive. Similar unit we could compare them to, again for the Wood Elves, another elite-ish armor-piercing missile unit. Now these guys are very much a different role. Of course, Waywatchers having much less unit models. They also have worse combat stats. Granted, they have a longer range, do more missile damage, and they can vanguard, stalk, and fire while moving. So again, a little bit of a different role. You can see their range is similar. The missile damage is not too far off, so you can kind of get an idea of how you might use them. Now granted, of course, no stock and such, but yeah, they definitely seem to be worth the cost if you can protect them. Or against a faction that's too slow to catch them, they can be very good as well, because these guys do have 36 speed, so they're relatively quick. They can withdraw away from things like dwarves. Skaven can probably catch them, but you know, other slower factions like Lizardmen might have a harder time catching them. So yeah, I do need to mess around with them a little bit more, but certainly in some matchups I think they're very good. Another unit I suppose we could compare them to would be Starfire Shafts. Now, Starfire Shafts are significantly cheaper. They're almost half the cost, but the Sisters of Averlorn are better in every way. I mean, they don't have more ammo, only slightly higher range, but significantly better missile damage. They also have, obviously, better armor, leadership, health, combat stats, weapon strength. Everything else goes in favor of the Sisters of Averlorn. So, yeah, you can kind of see their role there. In terms of the Regiment of Renown, the Everqueen's Court Guards, they have obviously better combat stats, leadership, missile damage coming from their additional reload rate. They also have a couple of traits. They have Encourage, so they essentially act like a heroic unit. They give that encouragement buff to all units within an area of effect, improves their leadership. And they've also got the Banner of Averlorn, increasing their power recharge rate, which is very nice. Alariel doesn't have the greater arcane conduit. She just has the regular arcane conduit. So the Everqueen's Court Guards will help her kind of recharge her magic a little bit faster. If you bring Teclis, of course, with the regular High Elf faction, you can also bring these Gials, and they'll just juice your magic up ridiculous. You can get so much magic out of Teclis so quickly if you bring these guys along. And of course, with Teclis, you also get Nets. So that can also pair with these guys very, very well. So that's it for the infantry. Moving on to cavalry, we've got the Regiment of Renown Dragon Princes, the Fireborn, one of the most expensive regiments of renown in the game, in the class of things like the Summoners of Rage and so on. Granted, they have incredible combat stats and a bonus versus large over the regular Dragon Princes, of course. They pick up a bonus versus large and flaming damage, which is very good in a multitude of situations. Again, if you're fighting big regenerating monsters, these guys are going to be a much better option, and just their overall better combat stats. I mean, 43 attack, 41 defense without martial mastery is incredible. It's super, super good. So yeah, they're quite expensive, a very big target, and it can be tough to make them pay off, but if they do, man, they really do. Moving on to the last, certainly not the least, and probably my favorite regiment of renown for the High Elves, the Heralds of the Wind, Illyrian Reavers with bows. So, of course, what these guys pick up, they don't have any special traits or anything. Their special trait is they're faster, and they have better combat stats than a regular rank 9 Lyrian Reaver Archer would be. So if we rank this guy up to rank 9, you can see they have better charge bonus and better speed. So that's the advantage they pick up over the regular Illyrian Reavers. They're also a bit cheaper, of course, than a fully chevroned one, but yeah, that additional speed and the fact that they have such good combat stats makes them an incredibly cost-effective unit. That additional charge bonus as well means that they're just they're one of the ultimate hybrid units. They can shoot at range, they can do the missile damage, they can get up in your face and do some harassing, you know, probing charges, snipe off low-value units or even high-value units like artillery, kind of out towards the wings of the engagement. A very, very powerful unit, and definitely my favorite regiment of renown for the High Elves. So I was going to do the Dark Elves in the same video, but this video is already 20 minutes long, so we're going to cut it off here, and I'll do a separate video covering Crone Hellebron and the new stuff coming to the Dark Elves. Very briefly, before I end here, I do want to touch on Elithanar and the free LC stuff that comes with Nagaroth. By the way, I love the two new color schemes for the High Elves. That green and then this kind of dark, almost like a brown, blackish with gold. It's super cool looking. But anyway, Elithanar is a ranged lord. Can't take any mount options, only on foot, but has pretty significant missile damage. Very good at picking off single targets like Lords and Heroes. He has Dark in the Skies, which is an upgraded version of the Loose ability. He also has Slippery, so he can get away quicker, and this Mislead, same idea here, get away quicker. Although this one, very unique ability, it summons a clone of himself. And he gets Stock, Snipe, and Unspottable, so you can continue to poke away with him while your opponent chews on that double. In terms of his items, he's got the Shadow Crown, which if anyone comes in an area of effect, he gets additional speed and melee defense. It also affects nearby units, so can be very good if you're running him with some, like Shadow Warriors, say. Someone comes in that area of effect, you get some additional speed and melee defense. Can be nice. Additional missile resistance as well. If you're expecting a counter skirmish like Elithanar, I expect will probably have the best matchup maybe against the Wood Elves, because you can take this extra missile resistance, you can go with a very skirmish heavy army and really outshoot the Wood Elves pretty effectively, which is, you know, tough to say. Not many can claim that. Moonbow gives him Arrows of Kurnus like magic missile ability. I guess it's probably more like Soul Quench. 2 charges, does some pretty decent damage. And yeah, in terms of the rest of what Nagaroth comes with, they also have a unique unit, the Shadow Walkers. This is basically an upgraded unit of the Shadow Warriors. They are significantly more expensive, but they have better combat stats all around. They also have poison damage. They have a lot less health because they have less unit models, but they do more missile damage. Let's check out their AP spread. 5 missile damage, so they do slightly more AP as well, and they also have a bonus versus infantry of 12, so they're much better at fighting in melee. Not that, again, you would want them in melee. They're a relatively squishy, high-value unit. They still only have 27 melee defense at the end of the day, even with that martial prowess active. That puts them up to, well, 39. That's pretty decent, but still, for an 1100-point unit, that can be pretty rough. Again, we'll compare these guys to Way Watchers here. The Way Watchers obviously have AP, where these guys do not, but these guys have poison, both at range and in melee. Of course, they have the anti-infantry bonus. Less melee defense, interestingly enough, but much better melee attack. Slightly less speed as well, but more armor and leadership. And they also have slightly less range and ammo. So those are Shadow Walkers in a nutshell. Again, can be tough to make the non-AP kind of skirmish type unit like this pay off in certain matchups, but in other matchups they are very effective. So just some food for thought for you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed watching this video about the new stuff for the High Elves. Like I said, I'll be making a separate video about the Dark Elves, since this one turned out to be longer than I expected, but I do tend to ramble on a bit. But let me know you guys' thoughts in the comments down below. Hope you guys enjoyed watching and found this informative. Yeah, if you do like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button, keep it right here for more Total War Warhammer 2 content, and we'll see you next time.